Discover how one unexpected secretary transformed the millionaire CEO's toxic world in 30 days. Emily stood frozen at the entrance to Jack Mercer's office, glancing nervously around the stiffly furnished room. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and the silence buzzed with an undercurrent of fear. She had come to this bustling financial district determined to make a difference, but here, surrounded by sterile glass walls and tight-lipped co-workers, she could feel the weight of her small-town upbringing pressing down on her. She wasn't just a secretary, she was carrying the dreams and sacrifices of her family, the very essence of resilience. As she organized Jack's schedule, a knot twisted tighter in her stomach. How did someone like Jack, with his brash ambition and ruthless fixation on profit, fit into the values her parents had instilled in her? Daily, she watched her colleagues shuffle around like ghosts, their eyes filled with dread, fueled by Jack's notorious temper. Each day he walked in was a day ripe with the possibility of explosion. She could practically feel the shock waves rippling through the team. They all towed the line, scared to breach the facade of compliance. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With her heart racing, Emily toyed with the idea of speaking up, but hesitation clouded her mind. Would confronting Jack about the toxic environment ruin her tenuous foothold in this world? Or was it her responsibility, as someone who had clawed her way up from the pit of financial struggle, to advocate for those who couldn't? Every day was a cruel balancing act between the promise of her own advancement and loyalty to the principles of integrity. The choice gnawed at her, simmering beneath her polished exterior, but then came news of a scandal. Rumors swirling that a deal Jack had worked tirelessly to secure was hanging by a thread. Employees whispered about potential layoffs, the very thought casting a chill over her spiraling thoughts. What would happen if all of them lost their jobs because Jack's ambition had clouded his judgment? Distress mixed with a fierce determination, and it fueled Emily's conviction that she could catalyze change. But when she put forth her ideas to improve morale, she was met with an icy dismissal. The crackling tension of Jack's disapproval ignited a fire in her stomach. That was the moment she could no longer stay silent. She found herself standing across from him, feeling the rugged pulse of her own frustration, ready to challenge him head-on. In a heated discussion, she confronted the corporeal shadow of corporate greed, forcing him to acknowledge his failures. It was painful, intense, and in that confrontation, something shifted. Not entirely clear, but it was nonetheless palpable. As she tried to dig deeper into the murky depths of the company's secrets, her investigation unearthed troubling connections to her own family's struggles, a tie that felt like a heavy chain binding her to an insidious truth. She teetered on the edge of both fear and exhilaration, standing between her past and her potential future, until the stakes were raised even higher. Jack discovered her digging, and they stood glaring at each other, two determined souls on opposite sides of a corporate chasm. The walls seemed to close in, entrapping her between her ambitions and the haunting presence of a truth she could no longer ignore. Emily's heart thundered, muscles tense and ready for a fight she may not be able to win. Facing him, she knew she had become a force to be reckoned with in a world that thrived on fear. How would she navigate the quagmire that lay ahead? The uncertainty left her gasping, and with a bitter taste in her throat, she wondered, would she manage to emerge unscathed, or would her pursuit of justice cost her everything she had fought for? The confrontation lingered in the air, heavy with an intensity that left Emily breathless. She had crossed a line, but perhaps standing her ground was the only choice she had left. Jack glared at her, his expression a mixture of anger and surprise that betrayed the vulnerability simmering beneath his rock-solid exterior. For a moment, she wondered if he would retaliate against her, but something in his eyes shifted, a flash of reluctant respect. This wasn't just about her job anymore, it was about reclaiming her narrative from the clutches of fear that had gripped her colleagues. Yet as the realization dawned that she had not only challenged Jack but also awakened a quest for transformation, a wave of doubt swept over her. Could one voice truly make a difference in such a toxic environment? Determined to find out, Emily devised a plan. She began observing the office dynamics, silently noting the unsung heroes among the staff, the ones who held the company together despite its dysfunction. She contacted a few of them discreetly, carefully choosing her confidants, probing for shared sentiments that echoed her own concerns. Words of encouragement began to unfurl, and Emily started gathering a silent coalition. They agreed to rally behind her if she confronted Jack again, but this time with clear, constructive proposals aimed at mitigating the toxic atmosphere. However, she knew well that suggestions by an unknown secretary could easily be overlooked. If she was going to capture Jack's attention and bring about genuine change, she needed to present her case with data and insights. Scouring through internal reports late into the night, she noticed trends that painted a disturbing picture of the company's workforce morale. The financial strain was evident on the balance sheets, but the human toll was invisible yet staggering. Numbers didn't lie, and she was ready to wield them like a weapon. As dawn broke over the city, the light illuminated a resolve within her. This was her time not merely to survive but to thrive, to claim her agency in a corporate world suffocating its very essence. Rather than cower to the looming threat of Jack's wrath, she would harness everything she had learned, understanding that her upbringing of hard work and integrity was her greatest asset. The day of her next meeting arrived, and Emily walked into Jack's office, prepared and poised like never before. The moment felt electric, the stakes were higher than ever. She sensed the atmosphere crackle with tension, but she didn't falter. In a brief exchange, she managed to regain some control of the narrative. "I have something to present that might change the way we approach the current situation with our clients," she started, her voice steady. Jack looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his features. "Go on," he replied, his curiosity piqued despite himself. As she laid out her findings and proposed her initiatives with calculated precision, she saw Jack's walls begin to crack, just slightly. He leaned forward, genuinely engaged, and for the first time, his gaze shifted away from domination to consideration. Emily realized this was her moment to evolve to not just be the secretary but a changemaker, yet, lurking beneath Jack's intriguing demeanor was a shadow of doubt. Emily could feel it. Would he truly embrace her vision, or would she face an even darker backlash? As her presentation concluded, the tension hung thick in the air once again, uncertainty wrapping around her throat like a noose. To finally reshape the broken corporate culture or become another casualty in Jack's ruthless game, what lay ahead remained shrouded in ambiguity. But with a fire ignited within her, she thought of all the voices she represented. Would she be able to turn embers into a blazing fire of change, or would her pursuit of justice lead to greater risk? In that moment, she knew one thing: the battle was far from over. As Jack stared at her, she understood that the fight to change the core of this organization was just beginning. The real confrontation lay ahead. Jack's silence hung in the air, a palpable tension that could only be pierced by the right words. Emily stood across from him, her heart racing, each second stretching like rubber in the current of uncertainty. She held her breath, expecting the walls she had begun to chip away at to rush back into place, but instead, Jack pulled back slightly in his chair and rubbed the back of his neck. It was a common gesture, but in this moment, it felt like a private admission of defeat. "You've done research," he finally said, his voice low and contemplative. "Data-driven suggestions interesting. But why should I invest in your ideas? How do I know this won't backfire?" It was a challenge, and she could hear the weight of expectation behind it. The doubt she feared was transforming into something more tangible, something she could work with. Biting back her anxiety, she smiled. A tactical move. This was an opportunity. "It might be unconventional to take suggestions from a secretary," she began, steadying her tone with conviction, "but I've had a unique vantage point in this office. I've seen the struggles our teams face, and I recognize the patterns that underpin our performance metrics. Ignoring employee morale is akin to turning a blind eye to our profits. I have data, insights, and the backing of several colleagues who are ready to support positive transformations. And it's not just about me, it's about all of us. She watched as Jack's expression shifted, his brows furrowing in thought, his eyes narrowing as he weighed her words. There was something vulnerable in that moment, a reminder that he too was human, even if the facade of authority loomed large. "Go on," he urged again, the defiance in his tone softened by intrigue. With confidence swelling in her chest, Emily launched into specifics, detailing projections for productivity increases tied to improved workplace satisfaction. One of her colleagues had shared testimonials about how changes in communication and recognition could alter team dynamics dramatically. As she showcased the supporting statistics, she noticed Jack flip from skepticism to acute interest, but despite her rising hope, a lingering worry clawed at her insides. Would he merely tolerate these ideas out of fleeting curiosity, or would he seize this opportunity for genuine change? "Emily," he said, breaking her train of thought, "these ideas sound promising on paper, but they require loyalty and trust across the team, the kind of trust that takes time to build. What if I give this a chance and it fails? The consequences could be significant." The doubt echoed in a dim corner of her mind. Here was a chance to step into a role she had longed for, yet it could all dissolve in a moment of failure. She could retreat into the safety of her previous role or push forward into an uncertain fate. "What if I am willing to put my position on the line?" she countered, the words spilling out before she could reconsider them. "I'm asking for the leverage to test these theories, to bring a team-oriented approach to our work dynamic. If it fails, it'll fall on my shoulders, not yours. But if it succeeds," she paused, meeting his gaze squarely, "it could change the entire landscape of our company." Jack's eyes bore into her, and for the first time, Emily sensed the internal tug-of-war waging within him. She was asking him to relinquish control, to allow someone he had previously viewed as insignificant to take charge in an arena he deemed his sole dominion. The room vibrated with unspoken challenges, his fear of losing control versus her desire to claim her future. "Are you ready to own this?" he finally asked, a glimmer of intrigue igniting in his steady gaze. She nodded firmly, feeling her resolve crystallize in that instant. "Absolutely. I won't disappoint you." Jack leaned back, lost in the folds of his thoughts, and Emily could feel her heartbeat echoing in her ears. She had crossed the threshold, but what lay ahead was still fogged in uncertainty. Would Jack support her ambitions, and would her gamble lead to a flourishing growth or a dangerous precipice? The stakes had never been higher, and as the door to her future swung open, Emily was poised at the edge of transformation, but doubts loomed like shadows, and she knew the real test awaited beyond these walls. What would they uncover inside the tumultuous environment that defined their daily lives? What secrets lurked beneath the surface of the office culture she was willing to challenge? Driven by purpose, she prepared to turn the tables, both on Jack and the toxic atmosphere. This time, however, she wasn't going alone. The air shifted noticeably as Emily left Jack's office. The whir of the overhead lights seemed amplified, and the hum of conversation from the busy office pulsed like a distant drumbeat. She was no longer just a secretary, she was someone who had risked her comfort for the chance at transformation. The adrenaline coursing through her veins mingled with an unfamiliar twinge of uncertainty. With Jack's tentative agreement hanging in the balance, two pressing questions emerged. How would she execute this plan and, more importantly, how would her colleagues respond to her elevation without formal titles or authority? In unfurling her blueprint for change, her first action was to gather support. She swiftly organized a series of informal meetings, inviting those who shared her vision. As she approached her colleagues, a blend of excitement and apprehension tugged at her. What if they dismissed her ideas? Would they see her as a pariah suddenly overstepping boundaries? Her strategy hinged on leveraging the insights she had painstakingly gathered from her observations. At the first meeting, she took a deep breath, glancing around the table as familiar faces mirrored her anticipation. "I know we all feel the weight of the current environment," she began, adopting the role of a facilitator. "But I believe we can uplift this office together." Sharing her data on employee satisfaction, she paused occasionally to invite questions and feedback. The room was thick with silence at first, until one colleague, Tina, spoke up. "You think we can actually change things? What makes you different?" Emily felt the flicker of doubt but swiftly directed her energy into conviction. "It starts with us taking the first step. If I fail, it's on me, but if we succeed, we redefine our workspace. None of us should be bound by how things have always been." Encouraged by her words, more voices started to join in, expanding upon their frustrations and hopes. Each proposal felt like a brick laid towards a new foundation. They discussed flexible working hours and a more transparent communication channel, exchanging ideas that pumped life back into their tired faces. A week passed, and each day felt like an uphill climb she was desperately trying to scale. Emily faced resistance not from her colleagues but from her own self-doubt, which started to rear its head as the weight of leadership began to settle on her shoulders. What if the data didn't hold true? What if she let everyone down? Jack observed her progress from the sidelines, and each time he caught her eye in the hallway, she could sense his silent assessment. He was assessing not just her ideas but her resolve. One afternoon, while collecting feedback from an early pilot program on communication overhaul, she realized her nascent network had created a groundswell of energy. Suggestions were flooding in, and she was tasked with distilling them into viable action steps. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The thrill of leading this change was building momentum, yet it was coupled with a haunting fear of miscalculating her next steps. Sitting at her desk, she stared at the wall filled with sticky notes, a visual testament of collective ambition. She felt the swell of determination return. But as she launched into fleshing out the next phase, her phone buzzed, drawing her attention. It was Jack, his message composed but with an underlying urgency. "Can we talk? The board wants to see results sooner than I anticipated." The implications of his message sent a jolt through her. Time was rapidly closing in, and now the real question loomed: would her ideas take flight or fall flat under scrutiny? With the shadows of uncertainty closing in, Emily knew she had to harness all her strength, creativity, and courage. She had ignited a spark, but now it was up to her to keep the flame alive, even as doubts threatened to engulf her. How could she possibly deliver in such a tight timeframe? What would it mean for everything she had worked towards, both personally and professionally? The walls seemed to echo her questions, challenging her resolve in their starkness as she steeled herself for what lay ahead. The day of reckoning had arrived, and Emily felt the weight of its implications press down heavily on her shoulders. The walls of the office felt taller, the fluorescent lights buzzed menacingly overhead, and every step toward Jack's office echoed ominously like a countdown clock. Time was of the essence now, and she could feel the pressure building with each moment. As she entered the room, Jack was already seated, reviewing documents that bore evidence of the board's high expectations. The air was thick with tension, and Emily could see the numbers on the report reflected in his furrowed brow. She had to present her data clearly and confidently. If she faltered here, everything she had initiated could collapse before it even took flight. "Thank you for coming on short notice," Jack began, his tone clipped. "The board is expecting projections and tangible results. We need to show that your initiatives have merit." Emboldened by the energy she had cultivated within her team, Emily opened her folder and laid out the key points. "I believe we can demonstrate effective change through the pilot program results. In just 2 weeks, our feedback indicated a marked increase in employee engagement, along with a willingness to participate in new initiatives." His eyes narrowed slightly, an unspoken challenge sparking between them. "Can you quantify this increase? The board is skeptical, and I need numbers." The moment felt crucial. Emily swallowed her nerves, relying on the data she had meticulously compiled. "The team responded to our surveys with an 80 approval rating for more flexible working arrangements, and several previously reticent members expressed excitement about open communication channels. We can extrapolate these findings to project greater productivity. We can't just sell optimism," he interjected, fire igniting in his tone. "That means nothing to people like them. They need hard evidence of progress." The sting of Jack's words resonated deeply, igniting a primal instinct to defend her vision. She reflected momentarily on the apprehension that had clawed at her since this journey began. What if he was right? What if she was leading everyone into another dead end, yet beneath that doubt, a flicker of defiance thrummed within her. I understand the necessity of concrete evidence, but the numbers alone won't capture the transformation. This is about shifting the culture we need to inspire a belief in the direction we're heading. That's equally critical for the board to recognize. Jack leaned back in his chair, fingertips steepled together, contemplating. It was a moment that felt suspended in time, the hesitance in his eyes reflected her own self-doubt. But in that silence, Emily devised a plan. She could pivot the conversation toward a strategy for demonstrating measurable success, integrating the qualitative data with future targets. What if we outline a timeline for milestones we can achieve within the next quarter? We could set specific markers for employee satisfaction and engagement to report back to them. The unease on his face gradually shifted to interest as she presented a structured plan. We could create a phased implementation of suggestions reported back, continually improve, and document employee feedback in a more formalized manner. These tangible reporting charts would serve as proof of our progress. Jack considered her proposal. This time the flicker of apprehension in his expression felt less daunting and more like a challenge met. That sounds promising. You might be onto something. With renewed vigor, Emily felt the adrenaline surge back. The conversation continued, and they began drafting a more robust plan of action together. It stirred feelings within her, a thrilling sense of collective responsibility, a vision taking shape that she could believe in, but beneath that exhilaration lurked persistent fears. Was this newfound sense of empowerment sustainable? Would the board's approval be enough to silence her doubts permanently? Each thought veered toward a path of self-reflection as Emily recognized a pivotal truth: she needed to channel her leanings towards achieving both personal and collective milestones. As the meeting wrapped up, and Jack rose with a nod of acknowledgement, Emily felt the flicker of hope ignite anew. Yet, the haunting urgency of her expanded responsibilities loomed closer. What if her next daring idea spiraled upward but also unraveled in front of them all? The stakes had never felt higher, thrilling and terrifying all at once as another challenge whispered on the horizon. The time had come to face not just the board but the lingering questions of her own ambition. The following days became a whirlwind of data consolidation and strategic planning for Emily. As she dove deeper into her work, she felt a newfound sense of purpose envelop her. Each morning, she arrived with a sharper focus, ready to pour her energy into making the vision she had shared with Jack a reality. It wasn't just about pleasing the board anymore. This was her chance to effect real change in the organization, to prove that she could lead with both intellect and empathy, yet, lurking beneath the surface of her ambitious drive were the remnants of self-doubt. She would wake at night, eyes wide open, racing through every possible outcome of her plans. The numbers loomed large in her mind. What if the projections failed to materialize? What if the board rejected her proposals before they even had a chance to take flight? The thought felt suffocating. Determined not to let her fears dominate her, Emily sought out opportunities to bolster her confidence. She began arranging one-on-one meetings with her team members, posing targeted questions to gather insights on their experiences and challenges. Each conversation unearthed hidden gems of information: employee frustrations silenced during larger group meetings, creative suggestions stifled by process-heavy approaches, and personal anecdotes of struggles that had gone unnoticed. Every shared story was a revelation, deepening Emily's appreciation for her colleagues as individuals rather than just data points. She crafted a new strategy that transformed her initial proposal. Instead of merely presenting quantitative metrics, she chose to weave in the qualitative voices of her peers. This collective narrative showcased a multifaceted view of the company's culture, one that was rich with potential yet marred by deep-rooted issues. As the presentation day approached, Emily rehearsed her pitch with a vivid clarity, envisioning herself in front of the board. She imagined the senses grounded in the starkness of the conference room, the click of pens, the rustling of papers, each detail amplifying her nervous energy. In a moment of reflection, she recognized how far she had come since her initial meeting with Jack. The timid woman who had stumbled over her words was being sculpted into someone more formidable, someone who could stand firmly at the intersection of data and emotional intelligence. She began to grasp a fundamental truth: leadership was not simply about commanding authority, it was about building trust, nurturing connections, and facilitating meaningful dialogue. On the day of the presentation, every muscle in Emily's body felt taut with anticipation. She made her way to the boardroom, her heart drumming an anxious rhythm. The room was packed, a gallery of expectant faces trained on her. Jack took a seat quietly, offering a nod of encouragement that transformed her anxiety into determination. As she launched into her presentation, blending raw data with heartfelt narratives, she watched the board react. They leaned in, brows furrowing with interest as the stories she shared ignited a palpable energy in the room. The connection between numbers and emotions had sparked something, a realization that change would not come merely from mandates and figures but from authentic engagement and shared experiences. However, just as she began to feel the warmth of leadership envelop her, a board member interrupted, intent on undermining the heart of her message. "This sounds lovely, Emily, but how do we know this isn't just a passing trend?" he challenged, his skepticism heavy in the air. The room fell silent. Emily felt the familiar tinge of fear creep back, a stark reminder of the stakes at play. Yet, beneath that anxiety flickered a burgeoning strength. She knew she had prepared for this moment. How she responded would not just determine the fate of her presentation but also her integrity as a leader. Facing him, she took a breath. "What if we think of these changes as investments rather than trends? When you invest in people, the returns are often exponential." The tension shifted as she articulated her commitment to ongoing measurement and feedback loops, creating partnerships across departments. Was she crafting a lifeline for others, or had she merely begun to carve out her own path? As she concluded, Emily felt invigorated yet drained, riding the fine line of vulnerability and resilience. She had exposed herself, laid her vision bare to scrutiny. What remained was the certainty that questions of acceptance and validation still loomed large over her. Her concerns were valid, but could she weather the storm? Outside the meeting room, Emily felt the adrenaline ebbing, oscillating between hope and frustration. Would the board appreciate her nuanced approach or dismiss it outright? The answers seemed to lie just beyond her reach, tantalizing and elusive, begging her to confront them head-on. It was time to reckon not just with the board, but with the very core of her ambitions, a reckoning that would ultimately reshape her pathway. Would she rise to meet the challenge, or would she succumb to the unrelenting tide of doubt? The moment loomed like a thundercloud, dark and charged, waiting for the filter of realization to spark its powerful truth. Emily stepped out of the boardroom, the cool air of the hallway brushing against her flushed cheeks. Each step felt heavy, weighed down by the cascading echoes of the board members' challenge. It loomed overhead, like a storm cloud, darkening her moment of vulnerability. Had her efforts truly struck a chord, or had she simply danced on the edge of delusion? The pulse of her thoughts quickened. She had expected some pushback, of course, but the sharpness of the remark felt personal. It punctured the self-assured facade she had crafted. Demands for further evidence for her initiatives blasted her confidence into pieces, leaving her grappling with old insecurities. Returning to her workspace, she plopped down at her desk, stomach twisting. Surrounded by the familiarity of her documents and colorful sticky notes, a renewed tenacity sparked within her. She gathered her papers, rifling through charts and testimonies from her coworkers. Each piece represented a narrative, a voice yearning to be amplified, but that wasn't enough. Emily needed undeniable proof to back her vision. Desperation morphed into focus. First, she meticulously grouped the qualitative feedback she had collected into cohesive themes. Then she methodically analyzed data trends and benchmarks, juxtaposing emotional testimonies against hard results, determining correlations that could fortify her stance. Utilizing her analytical skills, Emily developed a series of metrics that could gauge employee satisfaction and performance. These indicators would serve as the backbone of her proposal, a reflection of the emotional well-being that logically translated into productivity. She joined qualitative insights with quantifiable data to craft a compelling narrative, one that would leave no room for doubt. Determined to further solidify her approach, Emily arranged a follow-up round of meetings with her colleagues. She wanted to explore their views about her presentation and the upcoming board meeting. The feedback she received was enlightening, revealing nuances she hadn't considered in her initial deliberations. They expressed enthusiasm about her endeavors, valuing the connection she fostered among them. One meeting stood out in particular: her conversation with Marcus, a senior analyst. When she mentioned the board members' critique, Marcus offered, "You know, change has always been met with skepticism. It's a sign you're moving in the right direction." His words resonated, rekindling her spirit when it threatened to flicker out. Revitalized, Emily turned inward, reflecting on her growth. The woman who had once shrunk in doubt was formulating strategic plans based on empirical evidence and bolstered by empathy. However, this required her to fully embrace confrontation rather than shy away. She was not merely presenting information, she was advocating for a shift in the very fabric of their corporate culture. As the days passed, a new sense of urgency manifested. The next board meeting would not just be a presentation, it would be a declaration. Emily felt tougher, yet every interaction with her team, every critical thought she processed, layered her with empowerment and resolve. She examined her burgeoning leadership identity more deeply, aware that she was forging her own narrative. The morning of the meeting arrived, and with it came a newfound determination. Stepping into the boardroom yet again felt different this time. She was no longer the hesitant employee but a formidable advocate. The whispered doubts still echoed in her mind, but they became less potent, overshadowed by an increasing confidence. As she faced the board again, ready to present her reinforced vision, she took a moment to gather herself. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, the door creaked, and in walked an unexpected visitor, the skeptic from before, with an intrigued expression on his face. Was he seeing something different in her this time, or was this another attempt to exert power? Either way, Emily braced herself. The moment had transformed, and the stakes had risen. How she navigated the encounter could redefine her standing within the company. What concealment lay within this newfound interaction? Emily inhaled deeply, feeling the cool, conditioned air fill her lungs as she faced the board. The audible clicks of heels echoed against the polished floor, almost mocking her internal turmoil. The skepticism that had surrounded her before clawed to the surface again. This time, it was a different kind of challenge. The presence of the critic shifted the trajectory of her thoughts. Could she leverage this confrontation to her advantage? As she began to speak, her voice steady and controlled, Emily watched the expressions on the board members' faces, searching for any sign of engagement. She recounted the data she had meticulously organized, her analytics presented like a tapestry of insight woven together through her coworkers' experiences. Our findings, she stressed, not only indicate levels of productivity but also illustrate how emotional well-being fundamentally drives performance. But the skeptic's eyes narrowed, and Emily caught a flicker of doubt as he leaned in slightly. She could sense his scrutiny, the way he dissected her every word, but she refused to falter. This was her moment to execute the plan she had crafted with relentless effort. With each point, she felt a surge of empowerment, transforming her doubts into strength. The metrics I presented highlight a direct correlation between employee engagement and turnover rates, she added, raising her chin defiantly. However, the moment her statistics settled in the air, she noticed the tension spiking around the table. Interesting, but how do we measure the direct impact of these interventions? The skeptic interjected, his tone sharp. Emily's stomach twisted, but she took a moment to reframe the question in her mind. This wasn't meant to undermine, it was a chance to deepen the conversation. We can conduct targeted surveys post-implementation, she replied, her mind racing. Feedback loops can further validate our initiatives. Think of it as creating a continuous improvement model. Having said that, she felt an unexpected surge of confidence. There was a system and structure to her response, each piece fitting together gracefully. Her articulate defense spotlighted not only her commitment to the project but also her adaptability in the face of opposition. As she continued, drawing in her colleagues to chime in with their own perspectives, she created a collaborative forum. She wasn't just deflecting skepticism, she was reshaping the discussion. Each of her co-workers contributing to the dialogue felt exhilarating, like a team dynamically engaged, lifting her suggestions and showcasing their relevance. Their excitement matched hers. It filled the space, disarming the critical gaze of the skeptic. After what felt like an eternity, Emily concluded her presentation. She wiped the nervous sheen from her brow, now fully aware of the stakes and the potential outcomes hanging in the balance. "This is more than data," she urged passionately. "We're creating an environment that values each employee's contribution and sets a foundation for sustainable growth." As she looked at the board members, she locked eyes with the skeptic, who now bore an amused half-smile. It infuriated her. Was he still questioning her credibility, or was there begrudging respect in his gaze? The realization struck her with clarity: confrontation was a tool, not a foe. She was no longer just defending her project, she was advocating for a vision that encompassed their collective future. But the meeting wasn't over, and her elevation in standing could quickly unravel with the next questions. The air shifted as the board members deliberated, murmurings rising like an insatiable tide. With each passing second, Emily's heart pounded fiercely in her chest. What would the verdict be? Would they stand behind her proposal, or would the skeptic's shadow cast doubt once more? The moment loomed heavy, teetering on the brink of change, when every word spoken next could either lift her higher or unleash the doubts that once shackled her. In that charged silence, she realized one profound truth: she was becoming the advocate she always aspired to be, but how far would she be willing to fight to maintain her newfound identity? The answer hung in the balance, waiting to be uncovered. The room pulsated with an electrifying energy, stifled only by the weight of decision. As the board members exchanged glances, Emily remained acutely aware of the skeptic's smirk and what it represented: his lingering disbelief in her capabilities. She felt a pressing need to solidify her place, not only within this moment but in her career trajectory as well. She had fought too hard to reclaim her confidence to lose it to a single critical gaze. The murmurs continued, snaking through her thoughts like unwelcome intruders. Emily clenched her fists beneath the table, reminding herself that she was more than a mere participant in this boardroom. She was a changemaker armed with insights and a vision that extended beyond the data she presented. In that moment, a seed of clarity rooted itself within her. This was not just about a project or metrics, but about her values as a leader. "I stand by our findings, and I believe in their potential to reshape our workplace culture," she asserted, her voice imbued with newfound fervor. Her heart raced as she pushed against the familiar trepidation threatening to swallow her words whole. Fostering an inviting environment for every employee in the company transcended mere statistics. It was about forging connections and embedding trust. The skeptic raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her assertiveness. "And how do we ensure that this isn't just another initiative that fades into obscurity?" His probing was relentless. It felt like a duel, and this time, Emily stood ready. "By creating accountability," she answered, confident now. "We will assign champions in each department who will monitor improvements and gather continuous feedback, keeping this initiative at the forefront of our culture. Results will be tracked with quarterly updates, and we will evolve the strategy based on the input we receive." The ambitious response hung in the air, daring anyone to question it. At that moment, she could see her colleagues nodding, their confidence swelling. They recognized the possibility of what she could accomplish and shared in the vision of fostering an organization where every worker thrived, not merely survived. A board member, a soft-spoken but respected figure, broke through the tension. "I appreciate this commitment, Emily. It sounds promising, but can we really transform attitudes this drastically?" She took a deep breath, drawing on the collective energy in the room. "Change starts with leaders who model the behavior we want to instill. We, as managers, have to embrace vulnerability and encourage openness. Employees need to feel safe to share their ideas, and only then can we cultivate a culture of innovation and growth." The air shifted, whispers turned into nods of agreement. The skeptic's expression softened for a fraction of a second, enough for Emily to sense an opportunity to disarm his scrutiny further. She directed her response toward him specifically, locking eyes and instilling both confidence and challenge. "I invite your expertise to help shape this initiative. Let us leverage your experience to set a standard for success." That invitation felt like both a risk and a powerful move, transforming a challenge into a collaborative ambition. The board's demeanor shifted radically, now charged with enthusiasm rather than doubt. Emily could feel momentum building in the room, igniting a fire of possibility that cut through the lingering skepticism. Just then, the board chairman leaned forward, the excitement flickering in his steady gaze. "Emily, if we move forward, will you commit to leading this initiative personally? We want to see your vision realized." She paused, digesting the weight of that proposal. It layered additional responsibility on her shoulders, but instead of retreating into fear, a thrill surged within her. This was what she craved, the chance to be at the helm of something impactful. "Yes, I will lead this initiative," she declared, the conviction in her voice resonating. As the board's expressions morphed from skepticism to support, Emily felt a rush of empowerment course through her. This was an inflection point, a pivot in her career where she could seize control and redefine not only her role but the workplace dynamic itself. Yet, as the meeting came to a close, the unresolved tension within her lingered. What challenges awaited her? Would the inherent resistance she anticipated manipulate her progress? She could already sense the complexities ahead, the inevitable obstacles that would arise, and a question echoed in her mind: would her determination hold against the challenges to come? Her moment of triumph settled into determination, preparing her for the new battles ahead. Emily finally felt the weight of her journey lifting as she strode out of the boardroom, buoyed by the resounding support for her initiative. Her heart accelerated, not from anxiety but from empowerment and burgeoning confidence. Just weeks earlier, she had stood as a mere secretary, fearful of voicing her opinions, but now she was not only invited to lead change but expected to bring the vision to life. The immediate atmosphere buzzed with potential, and while she knew this was a nascent step, it was a significant one. Emily felt a newfound alignment with her core values, a balance achieved between ambition and compassion. She had demonstrated leadership through understanding and empathy, turning a toxic environment into a laboratory of innovation. Back at her desk, her colleagues shared her exuberance, excitement rippling through the team. They gathered informally, celebrating not just a proposal but the promise of a revitalized workplace culture. She gathered them, and they began to brainstorm next steps together: team-building exercises, transparent communication pathways, and a holistic approach to employee wellness. Days turned into weeks, and Emily poured every ounce of focus into crafting her initiative further. She worked tirelessly, documenting feedback, analyzing results, and refining her strategy based on what worked and what did not. The walls of fear crumbled further, replaced by structures built upon solid foundations of trust and resilience. Amid her relentless dedication, Emily found herself receiving unexpected acknowledgments from Jack, who, while still bearing the weight of his previous executive demeanor, began to view her through a lens of respect. He no longer dismissed her ideas but instead engaged with genuine curiosity. Their interactions felt different now, less confrontational, more collaborative. She could see flashes of vulnerability in him, recognizing that his transformation mirrored her own. Just as Emily felt momentum building, pressures increased from external factors beyond the company. The board had raised their expectations for tangible results, and the need to demonstrate progress became an urgent priority. Anxiety nipped at her heels, demanding a response. Yet, rather than retreating back into self-doubt, Emily leaned into it. Instead of running from the pressure, she embraced it, seeing it not as a burden but as a catalyst for clarity. On the threshold of another presentation, she prepared ardently, integrating impactful data and authentic testimonials from her team. The narrative spun from statistical proof to heartfelt stories tied to their collective mission. She realized she was no longer standing solely to defend a project, she was championing a cultural evolution. When the day arrived, the ambience buzzed with anticipation and nerves. Emily stood again in front of the board, this time no longer the anxious secretary, transformed into the authentic voice for change within her organization. Her presentation paired confidence with vulnerability. She spoke not just from numbers but from her experiences within the office, linking her journey to those of her colleagues. In these moments, the true scope of her growth crystallized. She wasn't merely presenting results, she was forging connections, facilitating dialogues, and embodying the leadership she aspired to create. Each question from the board felt more like a discussion than an interrogation, and her answers flowed fluidly, infused with the support of her team. She could sense the gradual shift to collective recognition of what she had fought for. When the board finally convened to deliberate, Emily felt the bonds of solidarity that had woven through her interactions with her colleagues solidifying her presence. She stood not just as an individual but as a representation of a movement toward a better workplace. As she exited the boardroom this time, the palpable energy was entirely transformed. The team had received a commitment to invest in the proposed changes, a testament to Emily's unwavering persistence and the visibility she had garnered through her approach. They would embark on their newfound journey together, widening the path to engagement and collective accountability. On her way home that night, the weight she had so long carried felt not merely lifted but transmuted into a gratifying sense of belonging and accomplishment. Emily had conquered her fears, demonstrated unwavering resilience, and emerged a leader capable of driving substantial change. She had achieved her personal growth, establishing her place within this corporate landscape while honoring the integrity her parents had instilled within her. She had transformed from a hesitant secretary into a recognized change agent, proof that resilience, when matched with purpose, could reshape not only her destiny but that of her organization. Now is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories, and leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your engagement is crucial. Comment your reactions and theories about Emily's incredible journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. You need to spread the inspiration.